Welcome back to the I Come First podcast. I'm your host, Amie Barsky, and here we are, continuing to uncover why so many fierce, highly successful women like you still struggle to put themselves first. This week, Master Coach Andrea Tessier joins us, and we are going deep into understanding inner child work, somatics, and internal family systems, which is parts work, one of my favorite things to do with my clients. Andrea shares pure magic when she connects the dots between how your early childhood experiences can actually shape your nervous system and influence your sense of self-worth in the world as an adult, like real talk. She breaks down what IFS is and how it can help you see the difference between your true desires and what society has taught you to believe as truth. You'll learn how to flip the script in self-sabotage and turn it into self-love, specifically when it comes to making decisions in your life. Should you push? Should we pause? Should you pull back in the different projects or seasons of your life? We also chat up the details of how your nervous system affects your love life, especially when it comes to speaking up and owning your voice and setting boundaries. Overall, a healthy relationship with every part of yourself is needed to really unleash that creativity, that communication, and that sense of deep connection to your intuition. So get ready for a transformative conversation that will light up your life and inspire you to start putting yourself first. Welcome to the I Come First podcast, Andrea. I'm so excited to have you here today. I just love your light. I love how bright and just illuminated you are in the space that we've shared together so far. And I'm really excited to dive into our conversation today. So welcome, welcome. And please, if you're open to it, share like a quick peek into your journey so people can get to know you.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for having me, Amy. I absolutely love every single conversation we have ever had. And so I'm stoked about what's going to come through today. And it's funny because you're asking about my journey, but when you messaged me like an hour before the call saying like, "Hey, do you want the questions?" My answer was no. Let's just see where this goes. And I have to say that like at the start of this journey, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have been like, yes, tell me every single question. I need the answer a week before so I can prepare. I would have had a
It's my efficiency pattern.
I would have had a script up with like all of the smart things I wanted to say. And so I think that's part of my journey where I was a classroom teacher for 13 years. All I knew was the school system, which is so regimented, so rule based. I got so good at following the rules. I was like, I'm going to make a career out of it. Right. And a bell for 35 years told me when I could pee. So how do you even learn to listen to your body, right? When they're like, no, it's not 9:35 yet. Like, so my journey was, of course, leaving that career that I was growing out of because of my own personal growth and mission was changing, and into meeting myself and working with me. And that was a process of, like working with my nervous system, training deeply as a coach, working on my own personal embodiment, and then discovering internal family systems. So that now I have a business that I love. I am been working as a coach for almost 5 years, certified master coach, trained in over 20 modalities, and a practitioner in internal family systems, which has been really probably the most pivotal and transformational work that I have done up to date.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite modalities. So those who are listening, we're talking about excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. We're talking about IFS, internal family systems, and it is such a rich modality to use, specifically when it comes to inner child work. So, my first question is, how does childhood trauma impact a woman's nervous system? And how can understanding this connection between these two empower a woman to reclaim and like really take her power back and reclaim her voice?
Yeah. So I think first, let's just like clarify what we mean by childhood trauma, right? Because it can be those big T traumas that are things that happen too fast, too soon. a divorce, rape, fire, plane crash. Like it can be all those horrific things. And it can also be small t trauma, the things that just happen for too long, that are too much, and can be a result of not having our needs met. Right. And this is what gets bypassed a lot because we're like, our parents did the best that they could. And you still didn't get your needs met. And so what that looked like for me is I spent years in therapy, coaching, doing all the personal development, looking for like that one thing that must have made me so effed up. Right. There had to be something responsible for my anxious attachment style and my codependency patterns and why I would shut down and why I was so conflict avoidant and why I couldn't make it past the first 2 or 3 dates with a man. There had to have been something that I like suppressed. And then it came to me through coaching. It wasn't one thing. It was all of it.
Here's the menu. Pick one.
It was not having my needs met. It was not being able to express myself. It was go to your room and pretend it didn't happen until we don't have to talk about it. It was that for my entire life. And so, you know, anybody that might be like bypassing, oh, my trauma wasn't bad as so and so, it doesn't freaking matter. It matters. That's how it was encoded in your body. And if the body isn't responding, if the patterns of our lives aren't responding how to meet the circumstances of our lives, we know that there's something stuck there that meant that our needs weren't met at a really critical stage of our development.
Yeah. And it's really important to have a distinction that, boy, this frog is still here. It's really important to have the distinction of, like you're talking about, it's in the body. Like the body is storing all of our experiences. It's a living library of everything. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't measure it. Like the body doesn't measure, oh, that's a little thing or a big thing. It just knows it was a thing, period. And I feel like we have, as coaches and as, studying neuroscience and the ways in which the mind is malleable and grows and how it's connected to the body and all the energetics that live in between the head and the heart. It's about this understanding of there is no measurement. It's just this experience of energy that happens and how you respond to the energy, how you respond to the actual experience itself, because everyone responds differently. No one will respond the same way to seeing a snake on the street or on a path as you're walking down a trail. Everyone responds differently. And for some people, it could be a traumatic experience. And for others, it could be, oh, yeah, look at that. It's so cute. Right. So it's fascinating. And I feel very similar, or we had similar childhood experiences in regards to go to your room, process it yourself, little one. That's because, in my opinion, my parents, I know now that my parents just didn't have the tools, and I'm guessing that was probably similar for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I can say that now, like really authentically. For a lot of people, that's kind of a bypassy comment, right? We have to be able to go through it and feel it for that to be a genuine truth in our experience. And so, yeah.
Yes, I love that. Now, we're using this word IFS, internal family systems. Let's, in a nutshell, can you break it down so our listener can really go, well, what the heck are they talking about? What does that mean?
Internal family systems is a modality that was developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz in the 80s. It was started through his work with eating disorder patients and in family therapy. And he was realizing that the way that his eating disorder patients or patients with eating disorders were relating to themselves was a lot like how he was seeing families relate to themselves. They would say things like, well, a part of me wants this and a part of me wants that. And he was the first person to start to get curious about what are these parts? And so a lot of times we use the word parts work to talk about IFS as well. And so it's I think a great example is if we think about maybe the last time you were invited to a party or event, and a part of you wanted to go, and a part of you wanted to stay home, right? And underneath those two parts, if we got really nuanced, there was probably a part that was afraid of missing out, a part that felt guilty for going and leaving the kids with a babysitter, right? A kid that felt guilty for not going because you should go. There's probably a part that's like, ooh, what if I go and I'm judged? Or what if I don't go and I'm judged? Or, the part that wants to manage everything and they're like, well, I don't even know what gift to bring for the host and what kind of wine to bring and go into overwhelm about that.
Right. I got to get it right.
Yes, those are all parts. So typically we think about that as having conflicted thoughts or overthinking. But in internal family systems, we're actually getting nuanced about those players behind that debate. We're going in and we're saying, oh, what is the need of that people pleaser? What's happening there behind the guilt? What is that FOMO like really touching on? And we're going there. And that's where the work is really juicy because we can actually create a level of harmony within all of those players. So going to a party is a small decision, but it shows up in the bigger decisions of our lives too. Like, do I leave my job or do I go? Do I stay in this relationship? Who do I hire as a therapist or coach? Like, all of the time, our parts are talking to us. And it's our work to develop a more peaceful, compassionate, witnessing relationship with each of them to really feel like more whole and integrated adults.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this. So, what I'm hearing is it's so key to understand the parts that show up, particularly when you notice the same pattern happening in your life. It sounds like, like relationship and job and things like that, like how you're showing up and having such a beautiful, loving, and compassionate relationship with these parts so that they're not, I like to call it like they like to sit in the front, they like to drive the bus. So, who's driving your bus? You want your true self to be in the driver's seat in a perfect world, right? However, we're still human. So, parts of ourselves like to grab the steering wheel, make a right turn, or hit the brakes, or turn the radio dial to a different song, but that might not be in alignment. And so, it sounds like, I love what you're sharing is connect to these parts, have a beautiful relationship, have a healthy relationship instead of judging yourself, because that's a part. I'm really, my inner critic and myself beat up. We have great, like we're still working through this relationship. I got to tell you. And it's a practice. And when the practice can become full of compassion, that's when I feel like my life gets a lot more like easier to navigate the parts versus the constant conflict, you know?
Yes, exactly. And I feel too like our society is really built on this concept of like willpower, right? That we should just be able to like will ourselves to do something, be something, know better, do better. And then when we can't, we go into shame and guilt and rigidity around it. And of course, there's a place for willpower and discipline. Of course, I'm not saying that like, the ancient yogis built that foundation like thousands of years ago. And when we're trying to will parts of us into submission, we're actually separating some really important wisdom and creating a level of self trust. So that's not to say we want a 6-year-old running our business, right? A 6-year-old inner child running our business, or a 14-year-old in our business, or yeah, a 14-year-old trying to date for us, which by the way, like that was part of my journey. So throwing myself in the bus there. But the more we can kind of like uncover that, the more we become these really empowered, courageous, confident people that get to really lead our lives from this place of like who we really are.
Yes. And so, what I really want to emphasize here is allowing that part a voice. Give it a voice, give it an opportunity to say what it needs to say, to express and feel how it felt back then, because most of our parts have come into our, human experience and our nervous system because something happened. And so, I notice when I get good grades, I get appreciation and love and attention from my parents. So I'm just going to keep getting good grades, right? If that's the way that becomes a part of, let me be the good student or the good girl or whatever that label might be, that because, and everyone labels things differently. I know we have like generic labels like people pleaser, inner critic, self-saboteur, things like that. And there's so many parts. There's thousands and thousands. So it's really important that we create a space where they're allowed to have a voice because they probably didn't back then. And I find when I do my practices, that's probably one of the first things I do. What do you want to say? What's here for you? How are you feeling? And I give that younger version of myself an opportunity. And then I get to be the reparenting, the parent that I always wanted.
Exactly that. And it's like, I almost think of these parts as like, because they are all younger, they all came online at times in our lives when we didn't have a choice, when they came on with these protective initiatives to make sure that we are okay. And so they're stuck in early childhood, early adolescence, maybe pushing at early adulthood before our brain was fully formed. And a lot of the way they act and react is really juvenile. And so we're sitting there going like, why am I not doing what I say I want to do? Like, why am I still acting like this? It's because it's not you. It's because it's a part of you that's driving the bus, that's in charge. And just like a toddler that's trying to get our attention, that pulls on your shirt sleeve and gets louder and louder until you notice them, they're just asking to be seen and heard and understood and then integrated with who you are now.
Yes, I love this. And just for our listener to get a little taste of, because you mentioned like a manager, and obviously you and I have studied together, so we're familiar, but there might be like, what does that mean? So can you break down a little bit of manager, firefighter, exile, just so they get a little taste of that?
Yes. So you can imagine the protective system like almost like layers of defense to make sure that you're okay. So on that, the outside are our managers, and our managers are proactive problem solvers. They want to make sure that everything gets done in the right order, on time, so everybody's okay. You're laughing. I'm like, there's people that can relate to this. And manager parts are generally exhausted because they are vigilant. They're always looking around what needs to be done. What do I got to do? What do I got to do next? What do I cross off on my to do list so that I'm okay? Right. And beautiful. Like, we have shit to do in our culture. Like, let's be real here. There is a place for that. And when it's extreme, when it's creating more stress and more disharmony than good, our managers are kind of in control of our system and they don't need to be. And to be honest, like most managers are teenagers, like parts of us that are teenagers trying to get it right. After our managers, right? And so if you're relating to this, anybody listening, like everybody has manager parts, right? Like we are, and if we're not careful, they're the ones that are running our lives. Underneath that line of defense, if the managers are proactive, our protectors are reactive. So something's gone wrong and now I'm going to fix it. I'm going into defense mode. It's like I'm shutting down. I'm going into people pleasing. I'm going to defend. I'm going to react. I'm going to be angry. Like it's more of a protection of like the self and the ego that comes from a place of like, I just need to be okay. And the thing about that is we don't generally like the result, right? We judge ourselves for the pattern, and the intention is always positive. It is protection. It's protecting a younger part of us. And so some good examples of protectors, like I said, are the saboteur, are like analyzer parts, right? If you have a part that loves to overthink, overanalyze, think too much, it's protecting you from feeling too much, right? If you have a part that shuts down, goes into conflict avoidance, it's protecting you from being humiliated and hurt. Right? And so, really good reasons. And it's important that we understand them and bring a level of compassion to these protector parts, because that's the way we start to build a more compassionate relationship with it rather than judging ourselves for BS. And then you mentioned firefighters. So firefighters are extreme protectors. Firefighters
And then the exiles.
and then exiles. Yeah. So firefighters are like extreme defenders, like they are in our society, right? If your house is on fire, you want to call the firefighters. They are going to, like put that shit out. And so firefighters are like the extreme inner critic. That's like, I am shutting shit down before it gets really bad. It can show up as addiction, eating disorders, parts of us that we feel are really extreme, even like really explosive rage and anger, like this.
Yeah, overproducing, overachieving, overworking out, like,
Yes,
yep, really avoiding what's actually there.
exactly. And so, again, all of these are parts of you. They're not you. There are parts that came online when you didn't have a choice. And what's really liberating in that for me is that you can work with the part, integrate it, help it get its needs met in a more healthy way. And then it actually isn't quite so loud in the system. And all of those three, managers, protectors, firefighters, are protecting this exiled inner child. Like the sweetest, most tender, most innocent and loving part of you that was shamed, that was terrified, that did not get their needs met, and then was blamed and shamed and shoved away. And we've learned to hide away. We've learned to exile those parts of us that don't fit with who we want to be, who we are in the world, that risks or threatens our belonging. We shove it away.
Yeah, or who we think we're supposed to be.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm supposed to do this because this is where I'm this age, or this is what society says. I'm supposed to be married, have kids. The whole thing is supposed to look like this picturesque idea of life. And that's not always, what where people's paths take them. And then we end up, for myself anyway, there was a lot of shame in going through a divorce. There was a lot of shame in owning my sexuality, my sensuality, and owning my desires of what I want in an intimate relationship.
exactly. And that's so common. And when we exile parts of us, we have to have this protective system to make sure that that part that we've exiled through shame and fear and whatever it is safe and stays there. And so when we can start to integrate that inner child, and when I say inner child, there's not just one, the inner child is a name for any aspect of our being that is a child and tender and sweet. They can show up as 2 years old, in the womb, 16 years old, and we start to integrate it. We start to meet it. We start to allow it to be witnessed, the shame and the fear and the humiliation, and we get to hold it from the grown human that we are, right? From this place of love and compassion and deep knowing that is so healing in itself. And when the inner child is integrated, that is the most critical part of our awakening and our evolution.
Especially as women.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know from my own experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. That connection creates such a massive opening to your intuition, to unlocking your creativity and even your productivity. I'll use that word in both personal and professional growth. Like that's been my experience anyway. I'd love to hear for you or some of your clients. Would you say that's
The inner child is the most critical piece, and that piece where we need to have that integrated so that, because yes, the inner child holds the pain and the trauma and the hurt, but also is responsible for our creativity and our innocence and our play and our aliveness. And so the more that we can awaken the inner child, the more we actually just have direct access to that. And who doesn't want that? Right? Because that's where life is really good.
and I really want to tie this back to, because I know we said the word, but we didn't really dig around it a little bit. But when we have this relationship with ourself, with our inner children, with our creativity, with our intuition, the level of self-trust like just get totally amplified, right? To trust myself and to go, "Oh, I'm not crazy." Like there are parts of myself that exist and I get to have this loving and caring relationship with them. And trusting ourselves to go, I got my back. I'm not going to self abandon. Because a lot of times, well, for me anyway, I felt abandoned in life. I felt so alone and so disconnected from my family. And therefore, I felt this disconnect from myself because what I learned was my feelings weren't valid. What I was feeling and those expressions weren't valid. They weren't validated, they weren't accepted. So a lot of shame came around that. And then really going, okay, right now in my life as an adult, I get to accept all of that. I get to be with all of that. I get to marinate in it. And therefore, in building my own inner trust of it's okay, it's safe to be yourself. It's safe to be who I am within myself, regardless of my external experiences or how other people may reflect. Of course, I want to be an amazing human being the best I can with love and empathy towards others. And I get to be myself and not have to wear a mask and not have to pretend anymore. And that in and of itself of ownership became a whole nother level of like, I trust me and I got me. And that created a level of confidence because that's a practice.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Most of my clients come to me because they feel like they don't trust themselves. They have a mission, a vision on their heart. They want to go for it and they don't trust themselves to do what needs to be done. And the thing is, when you start to build a trusting relationship with every single one of your parts, the people pleaser, the inner critic, the saboteur, the inner child, every single one of them, you develop self trust because your system trusts you and you trust you. And from there, you get to feel empowered. You get to feel courageous. You get to feel like highly creative and do whatever it is that spirit or source has put on your heart and your intuition. And you know that whatever it is, you can make it happen because you trust you.
Absolutely. I love this so much. And in my experience of working with my clients when it comes to parts work and the complex emotions that are in the human experience, right? We can't escape it. So how do we be with the contrast of life? How do we simply be with okay, this is here for me right now. And there's a lesson and a learning. And before we get to the lesson and learning, can I simply allow? Can I allow this to navigate its way through my physical body? Because almost always there's an energetic, like, it gets clogged up like a hose with kinks in it. Okay, how can I start to unravel and unpack these kinks and let the channel open up, let the flood water, like, let it go, right? And that for me was massive. And honestly, I have a couple of practices that I love that sometimes, it's certain women, we have our cycles and our hormones and things are shifting. There's a moment in the month where I tune into this particular skill or this technique that allows me to let it go, to let it all out so that I don't feel like I have to hold it and it's holding me down, it's holding me back, it's causing the mental spiral of the thoughts and all of the games that our brain wants to play to keep us small and safe. So when it comes to relationships and parts, and now you're working with the dynamics of maybe a partner's parts or their thing, how would you suggest or encourage the woman that might be listening right now and she's like, but my partner, my spouse always does X, Y, and Z, and it's their fault, and they're pointing the finger and they're blaming. Like, how would you encourage them to start to navigate that from a different lens?
It's so interesting. I'm working with a client at the moment who's in that exact same space. And what can happen is that when our system of parts does not feel integrated and in harmony, there is conflict that shows up a lot more in our external relationships. And so, what we really get to do is cultivate that sense of trust within first. And that itself, creating a harmonious inner relationship, is the precursor to harmonious external relationships, always. And I think what can be really beautiful is just knowing too that your partner, as irritating as those behaviors might be, also has a system of protective parts. right? And it makes me think of that sculpture from Burning Man of like those two grown ups are back and they're angry with each other and they're disconnected. And within them are these two innocent inner child that just want connection.
And I wanna clarify for our listener about what you're talking about. So, basically, it's a sculpture of 2 adults that are back to back and, like, arms crossed and angry with each other and not looking at each other and really, so they're back to back. And then inside the sculpture, because the sculpture is like a metal, almost like a fencing, if you will, so you can see through it. And then inside the sculpture is 2 little children want face to face, like hands to hands, and wanting to connect. And it's such a beautiful piece of art. It was one of my favorites when I'm so blessed. I got to see it in person and talk about like real shit. Like that's as real as it gets, when we're in conflict, when we're in confusion, when we're in blaming and pointing the finger and all of that, almost always that inner child, those inner children are just like, "Just love me. I just want you to love me. I want you to see me. I want you to hear me. I want you to hold me. No need to fix it. Just acknowledge," you know? And so, oh man,
That
humans.
that's relating, right? It's like we see that other people's annoying behaviors that piss us off are also their protective and manager parts that are protecting a tender inner one and who just wants to be loved.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love it. Is there anything else I feel like, as we start to wrap up this conversation, gosh, there's just so much here. So much here. Is there anything you want to share that we haven't covered? As we have a few more minutes left?
I think that if anybody is curious about this work is so transformational on a deep level. So if there's somebody out here that's listening to this who's maybe been hearing about parts work because Dick Schwartz has gone on a bunch of podcasts, you've done a little bit of learning yourself, there it's weird. Like when you experience your parts with a trained practitioner for the first time, this whole world that you didn't even know existed comes to life. You are sensing things in your body you didn't know were there. You might be seeing energies. You might be visualizing these like weird or seemingly weird characters or images that don't make sense to the thinking parts of your brain but actually make a ton of sense from your subconscious mind. And so I love to say, like, this is a wild and wacky world of your inner system. And combined with somatic work, which you adore, and I'm a practitioner of, when we can blend these two, there is nothing that I have seen transform lives, relationships, businesses in this way. And so if you want to feel more confident, parts work. If you want to feel more empowered, parts work. If you want to feel more creative, parts work because we are removing, building a better relationship with, integrating is a better word, the aspects of us that aren't really you to really come home to this natural essence of who you really are that everybody has. And we call self energy. But the thing is, everybody has it. Every single person. I have never met a person who does not have self energy. And when you're working with your system in this way, most people report just saying, oh, that's who I really am. And there's nothing more liberating than that.
I love that. And then they're coming back home to themselves. And in that coming back home, there is a liberation, a sense of freedom of like, fuck, wow. Like this is the thriving versus the surviving, right? This is what it feels like to actually thrive. And I really want to presence that for our listener. It's not a one and done, right? It's not, oh, I'm just going to have a session or whatever. Like it is just like any part that is well practiced. You're a procrastinator, you're a perfectionist, your efficiency part, your whatever part of that it is, it's well practiced. It's got decades of lifting the muscle, practicing and building the strength. So to work with the part and get back in connection, so excited, you get in connection with true self, it's practice again. So it's unpacking the decades of the packing that you've been doing for the practicing you've been doing for decades, right? And so I really want to presence that because there is no quick fix. And I think sometimes we live in this world. I know sometimes we live in this world where everything is so fast. Like, everything, we can get food at our fingertips. We can get everything we want in 24 hours or less for the most part. And yeah, so really want to lean into the idea of play with these parts, get to know them, give yourself permission to just have open ended conversations with them without any judgment.
Yeah. And the other thing that's really cool, it's internal family systems. It is a system, right? So just like one toxic coworker can like ruin an office dynamic, one more toxic part of us can really throw off your whole system. And so, when we do start to unravel the necklace, if you imagine like the knot in the necklace and you pull it, it does bring a lot of relief to the system. And so it's, a lot of clients that I start to work with are like, oh my God, I have so many parts. What am I going to do? This is going to take years. I'm effed up, right? Because we have an infinite number of parts. And I'll say, no, actually, because, we can work with a few parts, unburden them, and you feel a tremendous amount of space and relief quickly. And yes, I've been doing this work as a practitioner and in my own work for years. And I still will. And I will continue to do it because it's that important and a part of my coming home to myself. But you can get a lot of peace and relief.
And I also feel, as you open the door to personal development and growth and expansion, our soul is on a trajectory to elevate. And so when you're in that space of a learning mind, a learning brain of like, oh, what's next? What else is possible? And that's the play. That's what life's about. Life is about growth and expansion. We're not here to play small or what's the word I want to settle. We're not here to settle. We're here to actually keep moving. And so it's okay to want more in your life. And that could be more of whatever it is. It's okay to want more money, more love, more abundance, more joy, more laughter, more orgasms, more bliss, more chocolate, whatever the thing is. Like, that's okay, right? We're here to enjoy life and be in the luxury of infinite possibilities. And the only thing that's capping us from those possibilities is probably one or two of our parts that play a major role. And so like you said, if you can start to work with that one that tends to run the show or drive the bus, almost always the other guys will start to settle back too and they'll go for the ride. They'll sit on the bus and they'll go for the ride and your true self can go in the direction in which you want to create, those goals and dreams and desires that are yummy and delicious and juicy. And you're like, but I can't, but you can. Take action one step at a time, you know? So, how can people reach you? How can they connect with you?
Yes, come find me on Instagram. I am there almost daily. It's just my name, Tessier.Andrea. You can come send me a PM, tell us that you listened. I would love to hear what your takeaways from this are. I'll also share with your listeners my freebie. It's a juicy workbook called Clear Mind, Clear Path. And I call it an unconventional guide to decision making for overthinkers. And so in it, I am actually guiding you through some really juicy parts work processes so that you can start to connect with some of your parts on your own. And in that, you're kind of clearing the way for more clarity in your decisions. So I'll drop that for your listeners here. And, I think that the biggest thing that I hope that somebody can take away, number one, stop relating to yourself as I'm a perfectionist. I am a people pleaser. I am a this. I have a part that is. A part of me is a people pleaser. A part of me is a perfectionist. I have a inner critic part because it's not you. So that'll give you enough space to see that it's outside of yourself. And number two,
And it doesn't become your identity.
not your identity. It is not who you are. I guarantee it doesn't show up all of the time in every circumstance in every part of your life. I guarantee it doesn't. And number two, anytime that you are overwhelmed, feeling totally crazy, a part of you is in charge. So remember that anytime you're like, what is going on with me? I don't understand why I feel like garbage. A part of you has hijacked your system. It is not always going to be this way. And what that part needs is an internal leader that it never had. So meet it with compassion, meet yourself in love. And if that's all you start doing after today's call, you will be changed.
I love that. I love that. And then, so please share with us, what is your I come first daily practice, or one of?
Ooh, I was like, oh, I'm still like, which one do I want to say? Which one do I want to say? And before the call, I was sharing the season in my life right now. I've done a lot of learning and I've realized that there's times in our life when it's time to push, like when it's really time to go for something. There are times in our life where it's just time to pause and see what comes through. And there's times in our life when it's time to pull back. And I have the discernment now that this season of my life is about pulling back, and it's about really amplifying my self care practices. And so, and that looks different all of the time. And so, what I would say and share is like getting really clear for the listener, what season are you in? Is this a push season? Is this a pause season? Or is this a pull back season? And what do you need to do to be in integrity with that? Because my pullback season right now is lots of naps, lots of meditating, lots of walking, lots of yoga, and that feels juicy.
I love this. And I know we're kind of wrapping up, but I want to ask this question. So I'm going to ask it. What's the distinction? How does one distinguish the difference between a pullback and a procrastination part taking over?
Yeah. So procrastination is protection. And so I use the word discernment. So discernment is key. And that means getting really radically honest with yourself, honestly and often. And so you can feel the difference. You can feel the difference when this is a time to pause or pull back versus, oh, this is actually me procrastinating. Like, even as I say that, I watched my face and I felt the shift in my body. Procrastination energy is like closed in. I like scrunched my face up, I contracted. And a pause, when I was describing my pause, I was like leaning back. I was like feeling good. Your body will tell you.
Exactly. Thank you for that distinction. My listener, please hear that loud and clear. Your body is always communicating with you. It is always communicating with you. So when you're in that state of pause, it will feel more freedom. It'll feel like there's a lightness off your shoulders. If it's in that place of procrastination or another part, it will feel like a collapse, like a closure. That's my biggest distinction. So I'm really glad that we plugged in that last little bit here. So good, so good. Well, gosh, we could talk all day. We already know that. Thank you so much, Andrea, and all this wisdom that you just dropped here. Please, please go and get your beautiful guide, get Andrea's beautiful guide to Clear Mind, Clear Path. Go grab it. It's free. Give yourself the opportunity to experience it for yourself. And of course, if you want to work with Andrea or myself, drop something into our IG DMs. We are always available here to serve and support women who are badasses in their lives and who want to continue to up level and create epic relationships with themselves and their people, all of it, and in their purpose in life. So yes, have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.